Hi, everybody. It's another episode of Nick's Nerd Network. I'm back with one of my favorite nerds, part of my nerd network, John, and we are going to talk about racism and discrimination. All right, so John's back with us to talk about racism and discrimination. And John, so could you briefly give me a description of what racism is? I know it's a broad topic.
So racism is a combination of disliking somebody because of their race and having power to do something negative to them because of that. So it's not just like thinking negative thoughts, although that is not good, but it's also when there are laws or forms of violence or educational obstacles for people of different groups. So for example, in the history of the US, racism has not only been an issue of white people thinking nasty things about others, but systematically taking away their rights, like in slavery, or even when minorities have officially on paper had equality, still there are other obstacles that can prevent success and well-being and safety. So a great example is the ongoing way that our neighborhoods are unofficially segregated, and often so are our schools. And so in the US, even though on paper there's no law that says like white people are going to get a better education than others, very often if you look at the school districts that have good resources, those are the school districts where a majority white population lives. And it's important to remember that those neighborhoods did not spontaneously come into existence, because I sometimes hear people say, oh, well, like people just live where they want to live. No, for most of US history, including here in Ohio, there were very specific laws about who could live where. A lot of neighborhoods did not allow black or other non-white residents. Some also did not allow Jewish residents. You can even actually still see on the deeds of some houses, even though these clauses can't be enforced anymore, it will still say like this house cannot be sold to blank. And so these residential patterns and these patterns in educational access go back a really long way and originated in intentional policies.
Yeah, and I think I was watching actually a documentary, not really a documentary, but some like informative videos about such topic. Discrimination was going on in like banks for like loans, so it's like, oh, a nice wholesome white family.
Nick? Was?
Well, it
Yeah.
is, and like, well, a nice wholesome white family is here, so we obviously trust that they're going to be able to repay this loan. Here you go. Now you can buy a nice house and nice things and nice clothes that can then aid you later on in life, where there was discriminatory factors that prevented people of different ethnicities from also getting those same loans, which then didn't provide them with the boost or the investment to start living and buying nice things and those same advantages that we might have had
Right. So I think
or did have.
yes, and I think what you're getting at is that often racism, it's not only about what you can get in this moment, it's about access to the resources that set you up for your whole life to do well and to pass on that momentum to the next generation. So a great example is if you remember your American history, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, each time the U.S. would take more land from Native Americans, often that land would be given away to white settlers. And basically the rule was, if you showed up and you were white, or looked white, then you could get your 40 acres and a mule, more or less. And even though, yeah, it was like a hard life to be out there in Nebraska or wherever working that land, the fact was you still had this land to work, whereas the Native Americans who were there before no longer had it. Or black people living in the same time period could not show up to that land and just have that land. So to be clear, racism, it doesn't mean that white people never face any problems. It means that for a really long time in our country, since the foundation of our country, even when white people are facing problems or working really hard, they would be facing even more problems if they were not white. And it's important to consider how somebody who is working just as hard as you or facing many of the same hardships as you might face even more problems because of racism.
And it's really frustrating to think about because people say like, oh, well, I personally didn't do these things, so why is it my responsibility, or why should I care or worry about helping people out or helping to provide them with those opportunities? And you have to think, it's like, even though we personally didn't attack people, or we didn't have slaves, or we didn't like discriminate or prevent people from getting jobs, our relatives and ancestors may have, and some of them did, and that set those cultures and those people, it set them back.
Definitely.
And I think that it's a huge progress. It's something that one person in one lifetime can't fix for themselves, and it's a constant progression of bridging that gap.
Definitely. And I also want to add, just because we have not personally harmed people who are not white doesn't mean we have not benefited, even unintentionally, from racism. So, for example, if you and the house that you're living on are inherited from some ancestor who way back got one of those like acre handouts in the West or Midwest, even though you personally didn't take that land, the conditions of your life, the house that you're raised in, the money from that land does come from that. And also, you know, even if you're not the one discriminating against other people in the job search, when Nick or I show up to a job interview and we have less opposition because so many other people just didn't have the educational opportunities that we've had, that's a way in which we're benefiting, even if it wasn't our choice. And maybe some people would ask, well, if something good has come to me at somebody else's expense, even if I didn't plan it that way, do I really have a responsibility to do anything about it? And I would say yes. I think the answer is yes, that if you realize that some of the good things you have in your life have come at the expense of violence or loss to other people, it's really important to consider what you can do with your good fortune to help other people. And I also just want to clarify, we're not saying that like all white people are rich and have easy lives. That's obviously not true.
No, of course not.
But just that if you are a white person who is poor, you can be like pretty darn sure that it's not because you're white. Whereas historically in the US and into the present, if you are a person of color who lives in a place with bad educational options and poor health care and gets turned down all the time from jobs, you have to very seriously consider whether your race is part of the problem or part of the reason you're facing these obstacles. And very often the answer is yes, because of the history of this country.
All right, well, that's really all we had for today. Thank you so much again for coming in, John. And if you haven't already, please check out his book. There's a link in the description to an interview about his book, You Be You. Please check it out. It's a great book and a great resource. And that's all for today's episode. Have a great night, guys. Bye.
Hi, if you like this episode of Nick Stern Network, please like and subscribe, or visit our new channel. And when you're on the new channel, check out my new banner. That was made by my friend Jesse. Please check out his website. He's really talented, and I'll leave the link in the description. He's great for all of your graphic design needs.